Aloha, namaste. This video is for anyone who's interested in the subject of the Bhagavad Gita, but this is especially for those of you who are coming to Hawaii for this training on the Big Island at Kalani. And this is the second part of the first video I did on the Bhagavad Gita. I'm going to talk about it again. Today we're going to go over some different translations of the Bhagavad Gita. We're also going to talk a little bit about some of the most important concepts in the Bhagavad Gita and talk about the different paths of yoga that Krishna talks about with Arjuna. And I think that's about it for today. We'll try to keep it. I'll try to keep it short and sweet. First of all, I wanted to talk about translations. There's many translations of the Bhagavad Gita out there. Which one is the best? I do not know. There are a lot of them. I have not seen all of them. I have a few of them right here with me right now. I'm going to show them to you in a second. But first of all, we can say about translations. In general, you have two main kinds of translations. You have a translation that tries to stay close to the text and translates it pretty much word for word. And then you have more translations that take more poetic license and give more the general gist of it, as opposed to exactly word for word translation. And then you have anywhere in between those two. Like you might have, like, on one end of the spectrum, you have like very close to what the text says, and then on the other end of the spectrum, you have a very loose translation of the text. And everywhere in between on the spectrum, you might find, so you know, which is better, which is the best. I think I tend to go more to the center, and I think the Bhagavad Gita is all about finding the balance, right? Not being too much on one extreme or the other, so not being like so tied to the exact word for word translation, because that would be clunky and clumsy generally. And then if you're too loose with the translation, people won't really know what the text is actually saying. You'll only know what you'll get more of the translator's poetry and their interpretation. And every translation really is an interpretation, right? No translator has, you could say, a monopoly on what the text is really saying. You would have to be, in this case, you would have to be the writer, you'd have to be the author, you might have to be Krishna to fully understand what is being said, right? And so if you're translating it, you are interpreting it to some degree or another. And that said, not all interpretations are created equal. Some are closer to what it's really getting at than others. You know, we don't want to say that all interpretations are equally valid. Some may be a little bit truer to the author's intent than others. And that in itself is, some people say, is open to interpretation. And yes, quite possibly. But I would say that in general, you can tell when one translator is staying more, you could say, is more authentic and is more reverential towards what the text is actually saying, and is not playing fast and loose with the wording and so on. So with that said, I have a few translations. This one is Swami Shivananda's translation. He did this, I think, back in the 20s. He was one of the great yoga masters of the 20th century that really helped to put yoga as we know it on the map, right? Like, if it weren't for people like him, we would not have yoga in the West as we know it today. He wrote something like, I think, 300 or 400 books in his lifetime. He was just very prolific, and he was like so on it. he was one of those guys who just was eating, sleeping, yoga. And really brought some amazing stuff. And his translation is very good. Right, so that's his translation. Let me just read one thing that he writes in his introduction. One thing he says is that if you think the Gita is promoting violence, think again. It's not, on a superficial level, that's what it seems to be promoting, what Krishna seems to be promoting, but it's not. It's really not. It's a far deeper presentation than just that. And remember that the only reason they're even going to battle is because they've tried every means of making peace with one another, of reconciling with one another, and they were not able to. The only solution seemed to be to go to battle, and whoever wins the battle is the one who is the heir to the kingdom, is the rightful heir to the kingdom. The Pandavas actually end up winning the war. But anyway, next translation I have, this is one of the most famous ones. This is the one by Srila Prabhupada. He was the guy that started the Har Krishna movement. And there's probably millions of this in circulation. What he did was it's good in the sense that he has the Devanagari, he has the transliteration, the Roman transliteration, then he has the English translation, and then he has what are called purports, where he explains each verse, and there's 700 verses in the Gita. Some people say that the Har Krishna Bhagavad Gita perhaps is a little sectarian, whereas Swami Shivananda, and like, as far as I'm aware, the Hare Krishnas would not accept the Swami Shivananda translation of the Gita, because Swami Shivananda was coming more from a non-dualistic perspective, whereas the Hare Krishnas are more dualistic in the sense that they think of Krishna as a supreme person, like a supreme personality, which they get from the Gita itself. It seems to suggest that Krishna is this supreme personality, whereas Swami Shivananda and other people Swami Shivananda is, his name is Shiva, the bliss of Shiva, Shivananda. And he was more in this tradition of Shankara, which was the Advaita Vedanta tradition, which is the non-dualistic tradition of India, which tends to put a primary focus on the formless nature of God versus the God with form. Like God as a person would be the God with form. That would be understanding Krishna as in form. And then the formless is God in the abstract, right? God is not a person in essence, like in God's ultimate reality, or the ultimate reality of God, and you could say the universe, is not personal or personality. That would be the Advaita Vedanta view. This is a very big subject. I'm not going to go into it all right now. I just want to kind of, bring up the issue. And on this channel that I've been doing a lot of stuff on A Course in Miracles, and A Course in Miracles, the world of Course in Miracles has the same issue going on, of you have the dualists and the non-dualists. You have the people that read A Course in Miracles in a more literal dualistic way, because it's written in a dualistic way. And then there are the non-dualists who read it more in a non-dualistic way. And as of right now, there's a lot of fighting about it, debate about who's right? We're right, we're reading it right, you're not reading it right. It's the same thing that's in every religion. There's fighting, right? There's divisions, there's sects, there's schisms. it's happening everywhere, right? It's happening just like it's happening right now, big time in American politics, in Democrats and Republicans in the United States, but it's happening everywhere. It's it's a pandemic, but it's been going on, for all we know, it's been going on since the dawn of time. Anyway, the other translation I want to talk about is a new one. This came out just recently. It's called the Bhagavad Gita Comes Alive. Subtitle, A Radical Translation by Jeffrey Armstrong, his Sanskrit name is Kavindra Rishi. And a Rishi is a seer, a poet, sage, seer. The Vedas were composed by the rishis, who were these like yogis. They were yogis who sat in deep meditation and received this teaching in deep meditation, and then they transmitted it orally. It was orally transmitted until it was written down. Right? We're talking about millennia, way back. 3,000 years. Who knows? 4,000, 5,000 years. So this translation, he calls it a radical translation. He calls it a decolonized translation. Why does he call it a decolonized translation? Because his view, as I understand it, is that the British colonized India. This is starting, I believe, in the 17th century, maybe the 18th century. And I think they were in India for a couple hundred years. And in that time, they brought English. That's why if you go to India, English is spoken all over India, right? It's a fascinating thing, so many Indians speak English, and they speak English pretty well, right? That was due in large part to the British influence. But according to Jeffrey Armstrong, the British also, they were colonizers, and their translations of the Gita reflected like bringing Christianity into the text, essentially. And so what he's trying to do in this translation is to take all the terms that kind of smack of Christianity out of the Gita and bring more to the fore the original Sanskrit terms. And I think he does a very good job. I mean, for the most part, I don't completely agree with, I've been listening to him talk. He's got a lot of videos out. I don't completely agree with his points of view, but he did a good job with this. And he also translates it in a little bit more of a loose way. But he does bring in a lot of the, he tries to give like the deeper gist of what is being said in each verse. And he brings in a lot of the original Sanskrit terms. What he doesn't have here is he doesn't have the Devanagari, if you're interested in seeing the actual Sanskrit words. He does have the transliteration and the translation. He doesn't have a word-for-word translation. For example, the word Bhagavan, which gets translated as God or Lord, he just translates generally as Bhagavan. And he tries to explain what Bhagavan means and why it's not exactly God or Lord. And God and Lord are biblical terms. The word sin, is also oftentimes used as to translate certain terms in the Gita. And sin as a concept is also maybe more of a biblical concept, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not saying I fully understand Jeffrey Armstrong's whole what he's trying to do. I'm just trying to give you kind of an overview of these things. Another translation I think is very good is the Eot Esar Translation. The Eot Esar Translation is also a little bit more poetic. It's very beautiful, how he did it. And I would recommend it. It's a good one to start with. That's a great one to start with. And I've recommended that for the teacher trainings that we've done. I am also working on my own translation, and I'm seeing, this is like the first time I've ever really tried to translate something, and I'm seeing all the issues that come up with translating something, which is interesting to see. You know, a translator has to make a lot of judgment calls. So it's an interesting process. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is some different concepts in the Gita that are very important. The first two, which you see again and again in the Gita, are the terms dharma and karma. Karma is action, usually translated as action. Dharma has many different all Sanskrit words have many different meanings generally. Like if you look at a Sanskrit English dictionary, you'll see like the word, and then you'll see like 30 or 40 different possible definitions of the word. So dharma can mean, among other things, it can mean law, it can mean religion, it can mean moral order, it can mean duty, it can mean obligation, it can mean caste duty, it can mean calling, your calling, it can mean the original name for Hinduism was not Hinduism, but was Sanatana Dharma, which generally gets translated as the eternal way, or eternal law, or eternal religion. I like eternal way, the eternal way. Sanatana Dharma. So dharma and karma. So throughout the Gita, Krishna keeps telling Arjuna, you have to do your dharma. You have to do the thing that you signed up for in this lifetime. You have to find out what that is. You have to understand what that is. And Arjuna is a warrior. He's of the warrior caste. His dharma is to protect and to uphold the moral order of the world through fighting if necessary, and keeping the peace through law enforcement. And dharma also means law, right? So those two terms. I'm not giving you an in-depth analysis. I'm just trying to broach the subject. Karma and dharma. There's two very important words. Another two very important words that you see over and over and over again in the Gita are jnana, which generally is translated as knowledge or wisdom, and buddhi, B-U-D-D-H-I. That's, the Buddha, right? The Buddha means an awakened one, or someone who is enlightened, awakened. Buddhi is like the higher mind. I talked about this the other day in the other video. Buddhi is like higher consciousness, higher mind. Is that part of your mind that discerns between what is right and what is wrong, what is what is the right decision, what is not a good decision, what is something that you is good to do, something you probably don't want to do, right? That's your higher mind. That's the part of our mind that can choose between wisdom and folly, basically. Or you could say love and fear. Or you could say choosing between what is egoic, what is selfish, and what is selfless. And that's the buddhi. And jnana and buddhi go together. And throughout the Gita, Krishna is talking about two main types of yoga. He's talking about karma yoga, the yoga of action, but it's really the yoga of selfless action without desiring the fruit of the action, acting without thinking about what you're going to get out of it, acting without selfish desire. That's karma yoga. And then he's also talking about buddhi yoga, the yoga of wisdom, the yoga of discernment, the yoga of higher the higher mind. And he's saying, that both of these are going to take you there. And you could say that those are the two main paths he's talking about. He's talking about Jnana Yoga or Buddhi Yoga, and he's talking about Karma Yoga. So Jnana Yoga, Buddhi Yoga, that's the yoga of separating what is real from what is unreal, or what is true from what is false. And Karma Yoga is the yoga of acting according to Dharma and not according to selfish desire. They both take you to the same place. I think he's really saying they're both leading you. They're both. It's not like two separate paths either. Although sometimes Krishna speaks of them as if they're two separate paths, but they're not really two separate paths. They're part and parcel of the same thing. And then some people say that Krishna is also talking about Raja Yoga, which is the yoga of meditation. And he's also talking about Bhakti Yoga, which is the yoga of devotion, right? Devoting yourself to God or devoting yourself to some higher principle, higher ideal is Bhakti Yoga. Dedication and devotion. And then you have Raja Yoga, which is the yoga of meditation, the yoga of sitting still, being quiet, and listening. These are all in a sense, they're all separate paths, but they're all one as well, and you can do all these paths, and you could say that a holistic yoga practice includes all these different paths together: meditation and devotion and wisdom, discernment, and right action, right? Acting without selfish attachment, acting without attachment is Karma Yoga. So anyway, I hope that was a little bit helpful today. I was just, again, this is like putting our toe in the bucket, putting our foot in the door, broaching the topic of the Gita, which is a very large topic. And the Gita is really a classic of world spirituality. It's one of the great scriptures of the world. It's revered by millions of people, mainly in India. India is home to like 1.5 billion people. Can you believe that? And who knows how many of them are reading the Gita? Probably a lot of them are they know the Gita, or they're aware of the Gita, or they've been hearing the Gita all their life. Just like in this country, in the United States, people might not read the Bible, but they're aware of it. They can quote different things from the Bible, different sayings, and it's become part of our culture, part of our lexicon, and part of our daily way of life. And the same thing with the Gita in India, and the epic Mahabharata is really part of Indian culture. So anyway, I hope this is helpful, and I will keep doing videos. We're not just going to do the Gita, obviously, in our training. We're going to do other things as well, but I think it's really helpful to start with the Gita to get a better idea of what yoga is, this thing yoga. And I might do one more video on the Gita, maybe more, we'll see. But what else did I want to say? I think that's about it for right now. Thank you so much for tuning in, and namaste, and om, and paths are many, truth is one. Have fun. Aloha.